What's up, guys? This is TRT, and this is my PDL draft analysis for season 4. Um, I'm excited to be back since I wasn't here in season 3, and I'm gonna go over a few rules with this format for anyone who's not familiar with the PDL. Um, as with most draft leagues in Pokemon, it's a snake format draft. You go from pick 1 to the last pick, and then the last pick to back to pick 1. And this was a 22 coach draft, which is worth noting because that means that waiting between picks is going to take a while if you're on either side of the draft. And we had a 10-minute pick timer with a 24-hour grace period post the draft, which basically means we had to pick within 10 minutes or we were skipped. And we had 24 hours after the draft to fix our teams with an unlimited number of transactions if need be. And after those 24 hours, we have 5 transactions with free agency during the season and unlimited player to player trades because they're not very common. And each of us has to play 10 weeks, 10 regular season games with one bye week, and it's 2 conferences of 11 coaches each. So we were pick 6 going into the draft, and that means our first pick was pick 6, which excited me. Our second pick was pick 32, which scared me because I didn't know what would be available. It would be quite a drop off in quality of Pokemon by the time you get to pick 32. So going into this draft, the first thing I thought of is I need a Mega, I need either a Steel or a Fairy because these things go quick, and suddenly you're left looking left, right, and then you look at the draft board and it's Alcremie, Granbull, and Wigglytuff left as a Fairy, and you're looking at Shelmet, and you're looking at not Shelmet, but you're looking at Escavalier, or you're looking at Escavalier is a good mon, but you're looking at, just in general, lower tier steals and lower tier fairies, which I feel like that starting, even though you probably want to draft the best mon available, starting with one of those two types probably helps you most. And with megas, there's probably 12 to 13, maybe 14 megas that you could possibly draft, and maybe like after 6 or 7 megas, the quality does drop. So with my first pick, I was really considering taking Mega Diancie at first, but I eventually settled on Mega Scizor. Now with pick 6 at first, I thought I would get Mega Mawile. I thought I was going to get Garchomp with Scale Shot. I was dreaming. None of that was going to drop to me. But Mega Scizor, I'm really happy with this mon. Now, first things first, it's a different mon to Scizor, regular Scizor. In the way it plays, I would think some people would disagree with me on that, but I feel like this mon is way more bulky. For one, Mega Scizor is bulkier than Skarmory. That's a fact that's like blows my mind. And two, it is both bulky and it can break. And it's got setup in Swords Dance. It's got Curse. It's got Roost. It's got Defog. It's got all the options. And this gen getting dual wing beat, Technician boosted dual wing beat, was absolutely huge for this mon because now it can absolutely hit and break things that it couldn't in the previous gens. Like bulky grasses were not. Well, most bulky grasses are fine to beat with Bug Bite or U-Turn, but bulky grasses like Mega Venusaur, Amoonguss, these are mons that you wouldn't have in previous gens just been able to hit very well with Mega Scizor. You'd have to U-Turn out of there. Now, this mon does give me good offensive pressure, good defensive utility, a defogger, a mon with reliable recovery, and a steel type and a mega. So I think for my first pick, I was really happy to get Mega Scizor. Now, going into my second pick, my second round, I was kind of afraid what was going to make it back to me, but then mons were dropping. And I was really surprised that this mon made it to me in the second round, and this mon was Victini. Victini is, first and foremost, with 22 coaches, bruh, nobody's switching into V-Creates. Bandit V-Create in general has such few switch-ins. Scarf V-Create's an option. It can be done physical, it can be done special. It's got coverage up the wazoo. It's got base 100 stats across the board, which means it's deceptively bulky with 2 good typings. It's got base, it gives me a really good Scarfer at base 100. It's so much. It does so much on the offensive end, this mon. It's even got Final Gambit strats. It's got, this mon is probably one of the mons I've coveted most in this format, but I've just never been able to get my hands on, and I just feel so lucky being able to pick up Victini with my second pick, and this is pick 32. So this I waited a long time for this pick. Now moving into my third pick, I just wanted to get a fairy at this point because initially I thought I'd wait on a fairy and I'd maybe get um, Sylveon or Togekiss, but then Sylveon went, and the only other fairy I wanted was Togekiss. So I was like, let me reconsider. I need to make sure that I get a fairy that I want, and the fairy that I wanted is a mon that I wanted to use for the longest time. It's Tapu Fini. Now, Tapu Fini is great for Mega Scizor because if you know anything about Mega Scizor, you know that it finds a way to get burnt. That Mon will get burnt on every flame body possible. Your Mon could have fire type only in its lore or in a trading card game from 1998, and Mega Scizor will get burnt you turning on it. So, Tapu Fini giving Mega Scizor Misty Terrain is absolutely huge. It's also a bulky water, which knocks that out of the board. It's got several setup options, and in general, it switches. It makes sure that Victini doesn't need to be the one switching into fire types. And offensively, this Mon gets stored power this gen, and it's got so many setup options. It works so well with this team. I feel like with three picks in Mega Scizor, Victini, Tapu Fini, I'm loving this draft so far. Now going into pick 4 is where this just starts to hurt a little bit. So I really wanted Mamoswine because the next thing I was looking for is once I got Victini, I was just bloodthirsty. At that point, I was like, I want mons that people can't switch in on. And Mamoswine is such a difficult Pokemon to switch in this format. And what ended up happening was Mamoswine went 3 picks ahead of me. And after waiting 2 rounds, I was just, oh my god. So I didn't want to wait any longer on my next Mon, and my next Mon is Galvantula. Now you may tell me this is early for Galvantula. You know, it's a round 4 tier 3 Galvantula. But for me, this is one of the Mons I'm the most comfortable using in this entire format. 2, Sticky Webs. 3, I have run every set under the sun with this Mon, and it is so good offensively. And then it gives me a really good speed tier, which 3 picks in a 22-man draft, I did not want to have no Mons over a base 100 speed tier. So this also lets me run Banded Victini much easier with the webs option on Galvantula. There's several specs Galvantula, Life Orb Galvantula, Throat Spray, Agility, and it's an electric type that can hit grass types with Energy Ball. Now, I've already got 2 Defoggers as well. Yes, you can say I have 2 rock weaknesses with Victini and Galvantula, but I've got 2 Defoggers in Fini and Mega Scizor already. Now, am I going to run Defog on those Mons? Maybe not every week, but there's an option there. And yes, it's 2 fire weaknesses, but we patch these as we keep going. My next pick, I just wanted an offensive ground type at this point because anyone who knows me knows that I love my offensive ground types, whether it's Diggersby, whether it's Mamoswine, or whether it's Nidoking. Nidoking, yes, is a little expensive in tier 2, but this Mon is absolutely nasty to deal with in this format. With sheer force, being able to run both physical and special, this Mon is an absolute truck. It hits like an absolute truck. And with Galvantula putting up webs for it, this Mon is going to wreck certain teams. The fact that it can break steals and fairies in this format as well, where not everyone's going to have a good one of both, it's such a good breaker. And it just punches holes in teams, or it can just clean up games. So Nidoking was a no-brainer pick for me here. Gives me T-Spikes, gives me Stealth Rocks, even though T-Spikes kind of redundant, but then I do think people are going to get used to me bringing a certain 6 with this team, and then 1 week Fini's not going to show up, Mega Scizor's not going to show up. Things can change. That's the main thing I liked about this team when I drafted it, is I can bring any 6 I want out of these 11 Mons. And it can be any combination, and I can still find a functional way to make it work. Now moving on to my next pick. My next pick was Pangoro. So, looking at my team, Nidoking, Victini, Mega Scizor, Tapu Fini, I have a team that just loves feasting on fairy types. but I don't have a dragon. I don't intend on getting a dragon at this point because there's nothing I really want on the board. And like, especially since I opted for Nidoking, I was not going to go for Dragalge. I did not want Noivern. I'm pretty sure at this point Noivern had gone. I might be wrong, but so I just decided to go give myself a mon that actually incentivizes my opponents to maybe bring their fairies. And that's Pangoro. And that's not the only reason I drafted it. I drafted it because this is an absolute monster to switch into. First and foremost, I love that speed tier. 58 speed is such a weird speed tier because it with a choice scarf, it can outspeed base 110s. And this mon hits like an absolute truck. It can work under webs. I can outspeed several walls. There's very few things that switches into Pangoro. And it's got 3 great abilities. It's got Iron Fist to make drain punches and bullet punches hurt harder. It's got Mold Breaker. And it's got Scrappy, which Scrappy makes it hit ghost types with CC. It also makes it such that it does not get affected by Intimidate in Gen 8. And this gives me another knockoff mon. Keep in mind, if you want to keep a count, that's Tapu Fini, that's Mega Scizor, and now that's Pangoro that get knockoff on this team. So, and this also gives me another Taunt mon. And I really like racking these small things up because these are not things that really show up on a draft sheet or like a draft score or anything like that, but these are things that you look at when you're building, and there's just so much utility around so that you can flexibly build around these sort of Pokemon. Is it a set that you're going to bring every week? Absolutely not, but it's a set that's available to you, and that's what I like in my train of thought when I'm building. Now my next pick, I just needed speed at this point, and I went for Aerodactyl. Sorry, yeah. So Aerodactyl, base 130 speed, base 105 attack. I got sniped on Crobat. So at this point, I just wanted a base 130 mon because I wanted to make sure mons like Dragapult and Tapu Kokos, they weren't going to run Adamant or Modest on me. That's the main reason I wanted this mon. But then it also gets dual wing beat now, which is still inaccurate stab, but come on, it's something, okay? Like the fact that Aerodactyl had to use Aerial Ace before this gen was absolutely garbage for stab. But Dual Wing Beat's a good stab for this Pokemon. It gets Dragon Dance now, and it's actually got good coverage. Maybe it's not going to hit as hard as Mega, but it's a mon that hits hard. It's a great sash lead. It's a great now it doesn't have to rely on Hone Claws. It's got so many coverage moves. It's got the Elemental Fangs. Now it's got Dual Wing Beat, and it gets Defog and Stealth Rocks. So, and with the great speed tier and the fact that I can run it Adamant so many weeks, just based off of people's drafts, there's so many teams against which I can run this mon Adamant, and it actually puts in work as a breaker. So I actually this wasn't a pick I was very fond of at first, but I actually grew to actually really like this pick. Moving on, my next Pokemon was Tier 4 Miltank. I have to say that again, Tier 4 Miltank, because it's a bloody steal in Tier 4. This Pokemon gives me a normal type, which is a ghost immunity for Victini. It gives me Thick Fat Mon to take the fire type hits as an extra check for Scizor and Galvantula. It doesn't care about ice types for Aerodactyl. It's got reliable recovery in Milk Drink. It's got Stealth Rocks. It's one of the best Stealth Rock setters in a lower tier setting. It's got good base speed, and it gets Body Press this gen. It's got Curse. It's got so many things this Pokemon can do. And I think that having this Pokemon in Misty Terrain, where I can't even be toxic with it, this thing is going to be annoying as hell for some teams. And it's bulky as hell and annoying as hell. And the fact that it's only really weak to fighting, and Tapu Fini just comes in on every single fighting type pretty much, the synergy works out really well. Now, moving on to my last 3 picks, there were a few transactions and trades here, so I will go over them as if I've just picked them, but I will explain why I wanted these mons. Um, my next mon is Lantern, which I got in a trade with Ari for Cradily. Now, I was really sad to trade Cradily because I think Cradily did a lot for this team as a Stealth Rock setter, a Leech Seed setter. It's got Storm Drain as its water immunity. But for me, the big thing about Cradily at the end of the day with this was I had a Bug Steel type, I had a Rock type that is very frail in Aerodactyl, and I had Galvantula, which is a Bug Electric type. And this left me open to a little bit of bird spam. And while my team's not super weak to bird spam because it's very bulky, having Lantern here as assurance for that weakness was very, like, it's one of the mons that I love using. It's one of the mons I'm most comfortable with on this team, other than Galvantula and Nidoking. And the other thing is, you may look at that defense stat and see 58 defense. Lantern doesn't take damage, not because of its defense stat, but because of that massive HP. And I've used this to check Talonflame in the past. Even +1 Talonflame just really doesn't do any damage to Lantern. And it synergizes well with my other Pokemon because Aero doesn't want to take Scalds or electric moves. Lantern comes in. Tapu Fini doesn't want to take electric moves. Lantern comes in. Lantern doesn't want to take ground moves. Aero can come in. So there's and in general, between these mons there's decent amount of synergy, where I can bring multiple different types, different sixes within this team, and not have to rely on bringing the same 6 every week. Now, moving on to my next pick. My next pick is it was a free agent change. It was Dusclops. Initially, I had Turtonator in the slot because I wanted a rapid spinner, but at this point, I just gave up on having a dragon and during grace period. I dropped it for Dusclops because Dusclops is a blanket check. There will be matchups I've realized in this format where I can't switch in, or I take too much with either Finny or Scizor and I'm too pressured with between them or my other walls. So this mon is just a blanket check. Eviolite with base 130 and 130 in defense and SPDF. This mon is really bulky, extremely bulky, and I have one of its biggest counters in Pangoro already. And this mon can almost always take 3 hits, or at least 2 hits from almost every breaker that is not super effective against it, or even breakers that are super effective against it outside of Hoop Unbound. And maybe Weavile, Banded Weavile can probably 2-hit KO after knocking off Eviolite. But outside of that, there's not a lot of Pokemon that can KO this. And now you may ask me, why do you want a mon that Will-O-Wisps in terrain? It's not here to Will-O-Wisp. And first and foremost, it's got a move that can cause worse damage to opponents in terrain, and that is Curse. Curse still hits Pokemon in terrain. Ghost type Curse. And because of its 40 HP stat, Pain Split is basically a free recover. Now, looking at just in general, would this as a mon coming every week? Probably not. Probably not every week. But it will come in matchups where I need to depressurize Fini or Scizor or Miltank, because there will be different sets I run on every single one of these mons. Now, moving on to my last mon, and this was, again, a free agency move. This was initially Azelf, and I had dropped it for Serperior after Blitz dropped it. Now, Serperior is a mon I love using. Again, this is a mon that is stupid with its ability Contrary, because Leaf Storms, it takes 3 Leaf Storms to get to +6. And it gets Taunt. This is, I think, my 4th or 5th Taunt user. I've lost count. It gets Knockoff, another Knockoff user for this team. It gets Leech Seed, it gets Glare. Now this is a question people asked me post my draft was, why do you want a Glare mon when you're running a team with Misty Terrain? Well, Birds switch in to Serperior. Flying types switch in to Serperior more often than not. And I want to be able to para mons that are off the ground. And so it happens that a lot of the mons that, Serperior doesn't want to see come in, the Tornadoes and stuff, those are mons that can para. And it can set up a sub on so many mons. It can taunt walls, can leech seed and taunt steel types. This is such a useful Pokemon to have. And it doesn't look very bulky, but 75 HP, especially with that speed tier, you can invest in it and it can function as a pseudo ground resist as well. I really liked getting this mon, and it fixed my speed tier between Galvantula at 108 and Aerodactyl at 130. So I really enjoyed this draft. All in all, it was a bit of a difficult thing, like with the 10-minute timer, but I really liked how my team turned out, and I'm really looking forward to this season. And hopefully, I'll be able to upload my games. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and this is me signing off.